to another episode of the Forge of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Alex Ooley, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Eric Ohlhausen, right? And from Old Glory Bank.
Yeah.
And it's not just any bank, right? That you can go down the street and JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America. But if you have been paying attention at all to the gun industry, you know that many of those bigger banks are not friendly to your individual liberty, your privacy, but certainly not firearms.
That's right. That's putting it right. Yeah.
So today, I'm glad to talk about a bank that is unique, that sets itself apart in many ways, and in lots of the ways that I just alluded to.
Yeah.
So, Eric, thanks for joining the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're here on the show floor at the NRA Annual Meeting in Houston, Texas, and it's I don't know. I haven't seen any other banks here. Why is Old Glory Bank at the NRA Annual Meeting in Houston?
It's completely consistent with why we exist, to be honest. I'll give a brief history of Old Glory Bank because it'll help explain how we got to where we are.
Sure.
Old Glory Bank, I got the idea for back in 2020. The audience will recall that was what's jokingly referred to as the Summer of Love and the craziness that was going on with the riots and so forth. The police being vilified for doing their hard work, the sports teams kneeling for the anthem and the flag. And quite frankly, and my wife can confirm this, I was yelling at the TV and I just, kept getting tired of yelling at the TV and thought we need to do something. I come out of the financial world. I've been with banks. I've been done M&A work. I've worked for financial technology businesses that I've started. So it was a world that I knew and understood. And I felt America needed a bank that was supportive of traditional values, that had respect for the Constitution, that loved its military and police, and that was there to be a safe haven from the cancel culture. Because I started to notice also, along with that social mayhem going on, started to notice how the cancel culture was starting to infect the banking system, and it's referred to as debanking. The listeners might know that Trump, is one of his first executive orders was against debanking, and because of course the Trump administration and individuals, family members were victims of banks closing their accounts. It broadly was occurring. The whole industry, firearms industry, comes under fire all the way back to the Obama administration, what was referred to as choke point, Operation Choke Point. Under the Biden administration, it was Choke Point 2.0. But so we sought out to be a market response to what we were seeing that was lacking in the marketplace. I love to point out that early on, we drew the attention of some really prominent patriots who loved that idea that I just described, or those ideas. So co-founders of mine in Old Glory Bank are Secretary Ben Carson, Larry Elder, country singer John Rich is one of my co-founders, Sean Spicer as well. Larry Elder, Ben Carson, and Sean Spicer are actually on our board of directors, as is Bill Shine, who was Deputy Chief of Staff in Trump's first administration. So a lot of great folks who helped validate that what we're doing was a very legitimate response to what people were seeing in the market.
Yeah. And people, you hear people talking about money, and it sort of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths, right?
Yeah.
But money serves a very useful function, right? That it's the lifeblood of the economy. And if institutions can just, as the name implies, choke off the lifeblood of the economy through this choke point operation, then people can just no longer go out and live their life and survive, right?
That's right.
So you need to have institutions like Old Glory Bank who allow people to live and to operate their businesses freely without fear of being cut off from their livelihood.
That's right. And I describe it as, we have rights that we fight for. And quite often, the focus on free speech and the right to bear arms. But those only are valid and worth fighting for if you can actually exercise them. And for example, free speech, if you can't you as a communicator can't voice your opinion because you don't have a bank account that pays for the gas for you to get to this event, then what's the right what's the purpose
or
that
for
you
this
fought for?
equipment
Exactly.
or
Similarly with firearms,
right.
If you have a firearm but you don't have access to ammunition, then what's the point of that? It's of little value. And so similarly, we feel that banking is such a integral part of existing or participating in our financial system, and we defend the right of anyone clear across the political spectrum. We're very principled about it, and so long as you're lawfully operating, we feel you have the right to participate in our financial system.
Now, I've actually got a friend who was personally affected by Operation Choke Point.
Yeah.
They had an account. They operate a firearms range in Indiana. They had a bank account with a large bank, and just randomly, no warning, no clue what was happening, no clue what they did wrong. Their accounts were just closed.
Yeah.
They had to pick up their money and move it somewhere else.
Yeah. No.
And I'm sure you're familiar with lots of stories like that.
No doubt. No,
Yeah.
it's rampant. And I've also described to people, and first of all, Old Glory Bank is available to everyone. So we are a digital first bank. We do have one location in Oklahoma. We have customers in all 50 states, tens of thousands of customers. So anyone who's hearing this, who's viewing this, is a candidate to be a customer, both individuals as well as businesses. And we are there to address that very topic you're talking about, is that a lot of people say, well, I'm not an outspoken political person, my bank isn't really going to, why would they cancel me? I think a couple things are important. First of all, principled people ought to take some initiative, and I encourage people, you have the power to vote with your feet, to vote with your wallet, and why would you support the big banks that are penalizing an industry that we care about? And just out of solidarity, I think there's a lot to be said for going to and supporting institutions that are supportive of the broader cause, is one thing. And that's not just firearms. We're also, as I described, supportive of America, of our traditional values, of our military, of our police. But then also just the masses, general population, are susceptible to being canceled just in general. For instance, PayPal does not allow transactions involving firearms or ammunition. It's in their terms of use. It's in the same paragraph that outlaws PayPal's use for stolen property and illegal drugs. Firearms and ammunition. They lump those together, and it's crazy. It's like illegal activity, and not just legal activity with firearms, but constitutionally protected legal activity they are prohibiting. And so, or you described a firearms merchant. If I can't walk in, maybe that shop was closed temporarily because they were seeking an alternative financial source. I would have indirectly been, canceled by that bank because my ability to transact lawfully had been restricted. And so it really is a widespread issue that people have the power to in their own way.
Yes, yeah. My perception, and obviously you'll have a better take on this, is that there's a lot of friction in moving banks. And a lot of times people have an account with a large bank because it's easy, it's convenient, that's who they started with, and they don't want to move.
Yeah.
And the other part of that, I think, is that people have accounts with large banks in particular because they feel like they're not going to fail. They're not going to fall apart.
Yeah.
If they do, the government's going to prop them up because they're too big to fail mentality.
Right. Yeah.
But Old Glory Bank's not. A little bit about that.
Sure, and I'm happy to. First of all, we are a FDIC-insured chartered bank, so we have those protections that all banks have who participate and are actual chartered banks. We have a broad footprint of customers, even though it's a one location in Oklahoma. We have customers in all 50 states. We have those protections of. It's the most regulated industry. I think firearms, certainly understandably, is people know that it's a regulated industry. Banking is by far and away just another order of magnitude of regulatory requirements. So, we have all those oversight and things we have to address and adhere to as any bank. And we really have seen some phenomenal growth because we have phenomenal technology. We're the one started out as one location in Oklahoma with just a few hundred customers, even though it was a very long standing bank. It just had not grown from its local location in Oklahoma. But we went from about 300 customers, and in 3 years of introducing great technology to open accounts in all states, we have now over 85,000 accounts open clear across the country, businesses and individuals. And the reason several fold that people come to to Old Glory Bank in lieu of the other banks is it's the solidarity of the shared vision and values. It's incredible technology, and I really don't mean that say that lightly. I put our mobile app and online banking experience up against B of A, Chase, Citi. It really serves as an app of app, a financial app of apps. So you mentioned about the friction of moving from one bank to another, and I recognize that. I mean, even though I'm a founder of Old Glory Bank, I still have accounts elsewhere, credit cards. You want to keep those just because the longevity of a relationship is valuable. So it doesn't have to be, all or nothing. And I encourage people to open an account. It takes 8 minutes online or over your phone to open an Old Glory Bank account, move a couple $100 over and experience what it's like. And, maybe do a partial, a portion of your direct deposit, whether it's benefits or payroll, have a portion go to that account and start to experience what it's like and link to your other accounts. One thing I love showing, a couple things with our technology, is you can look and see, how often maybe on a Sunday you're looking at some of the things you might have done Friday and Saturday nights and say, maybe you went out to eat, and you have to open up 3 or 4 different apps to see, was I charged correctly? Because you don't recall which card you used. In the Old Glory Bank app, you can see every account that you've linked, and even sequentially, not even having to open up different pages to see your whole financial life right there in one app. So that's great. Sometimes you see a charge and you think, that doesn't look familiar. With our app, you can click on that transaction and a map pops up and it shows the location of that merchant. And you can say, oh, that was that place my wife and I stepped into. That's legitimate. And so now, my mind's at ease that I wasn't, hacked or my card stolen or something. So really good technology there. And one other thing I want to say in practical terms about the banking, a lot of people, that maybe haven't experienced a fully digital bank, and they say, okay, it's great. I can take a picture of my check to deposit it, can go to an ATM to take money out for free in a surcharge-free network that we participate in, can see all the online banking and move money between accounts. But a lot of individuals maybe make, cash earnings. Maybe they sell some things or do services on the weekend or whenever and they get paid in cash or tip money, or maybe, I sold a sofa on the weekend, online, and now I've got a few $100. How do you get that into your online account? We have solved for that through a service that we offer called Old Glory Cash In. And there are about 88,000 retail locations our customers can walk into, and just by showing their mobile app, a barcode is scanned and the cashier scans it like I'm buying a pack of gum. And immediately, let's say I hand over $300, it's free to our customer, so long as it's $200 or more. And that is immediately credited into the account as a free deposit. If there were an ATM outside of that retail store, the money would already be available. I could pull it out within seconds of, walking from inside to outside. So really has solved for every possible need an individual might have for otherwise feeling they might need to walk into a physical branch.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That was going to be one of my questions. Is how do you solve for the cash in hand person?
Yeah.
Right? So,
and it's a legitimate issue, and we have solved it in a beautiful way.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, there are some people who might be out there thinking, I'm not engaged in the firearms business. I don't engage in transactions that the government might care about. I just buy groceries and pay my bills.
Sure.
Why would I switch banks to a bank like Old Glory? I mean, I may share values with Old Glory, but how does that help? What other ancillary benefits might there be to that person? Like, obviously, I'm thinking of things like Old Glory is probably not going to be lobbying for things that invade their person's privacy or what, those sorts of things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Actually, to the contrary, one of my co-founders in the bank, our CEO, Mike Ring, testified in a Senate hearing last year that was on the issue of debanking. And actually, everyone's probably familiar with the Senate hearings being filmed where the, executives are on one side of the table and the senators are out there grilling them. And my partner, Mike Ring, was talking against the big banks, talking against the whole culture of debanking, really fighting for the rights of individuals to operate in the financial system. That discussion also got into some egregious violations of privacy, of personal transaction data of customers that customers of the big banks were subjected to voluntarily having their data shared by B of A, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, PNC, KeyBank, all the big banks, a couple of years ago, going back to January 6th, were voluntarily sharing data with the big banks of who shopped at an outdoor store like Cabela's or Bass Pro Shop, and therefore might be a firearms owner, or just maybe happened to buy a cup of coffee in DC in January of 2021, and therefore might have been up to some bad behavior. Just these crazy assumptions or presumptions of guilt, of data being voluntarily shared. And so one thing I like to communicate to individuals is if you don't want to be subjected to that, if you don't believe in banks' actions that I just described, then come to a bank that is completely opposed to that has people involved in it who are adamant defenders of financial liberty and freedoms. Old Glory Bank is the bank for them. Similarly, we do much more than just proclaim our love of country and the flag. As much as I enjoy that, and I respect those who do, and we do that all day long, I think it's important to tangibly do things as well beyond that. For example, Old Glory Bank offers a product called Old Glory Protect, which is a free product or free service for any customer of ours who is what we call a protector. Generally speaking, that's any member of the military, all branches, including reserves, any member of a first responder unit, police, firefighters, border patrol agents, that general audience of protectors, any of them who bank at Old Glory Bank, and do a little bit of direct deposit just to demonstrate they actually are using the bank, for free gets a $100,000 line of duty death benefit. So God forbid, should something happen to one of those individuals in the line of duty where they lose their life, their selected beneficiaries, family members, or whoever they've identified, receives $100,000 as a payout from a policy that we, the bank, have been paying the premium for, just for banking with us. And so I would say for any protectors, that's why wouldn't you come get a free account at Old Glory Bank and get that added benefit, just to add on to anything else you might have in place. And then more broadly to the general population, we encourage people to come to the bank that protect those who protect you.
Yeah. Fantastic. One of the things that we talked about pre-show was sort of forward-thinking technology. Obviously, the app. You promoted the app and how fantastic that is. One thing that a lot of people are starting to think about is stable coins, crypto, Bitcoin. What engagement has Old Glory had in that arena?
Great question, because we are just a couple months from rolling out some groundbreaking, and it's surprising a smaller bank like Old Glory Bank, because we're so tech oriented. We're essentially a fintech that also is a bank. We are have a very robust set of tools that we'll be rolling out, fully integrating traditional banking with crypto and stablecoin and blockchain banking. Soon to come out, and any viewer can go to our website, oldglorybank.com, not just to learn about opening an account, but also to learn about, what I'm just about to describe. We have a full recorded video demonstration of what I'll describe now.
And I'll link to that in the show notes.
Please do. And it's called Next Gen Banking. And soon what our customers will be able to do is within our banking environment, whether it's online, through laptop, desktop, or else mobile access, be able to not only see your checking and savings balances and move money and your credit card transactions and view traditional banking, but then also engage in cryptocurrencies and buy and sell, Ethereum or Bitcoin or XRP, whatever you might want to do, or stablecoin. And we'll be issuing our own stablecoin. The Genius Act really defined a important role for banks going forward as essentially the de facto issuers of stablecoin, which for those who might not be as familiar with, it's analogous to a electronic cashier's check. It's representative of real money elsewhere. So a digital tokenized version of true deposits that are not just susceptible to the whims of what Bitcoin might be worth or so forth. But the Genius Act defined that stablecoin must be 1-for-1, 100% offset by real cash balances or treasuries that are very liquid. So not 93 days or less.
And not in a fractional sense, a
not
one-to-one.
into being lent out and, susceptible to bad loans and so forth. So it essentially is digital cash, USD, that will not fluctuate because it is by law, by the Genius Act requiring. And so for us, it is the ultimate delivery of what we have always preached, which is financial liberty, as privacy, security, and liberty. And for our customers who do value that their personal agency, their own autonomy to have control of their funds and not be susceptible to the prying eyes of big government or the prying eyes of the card networks or the big banks reporting their transactions elsewhere. It really does deliver this personal autonomy, and we'll soon be rolling that out. It's called Old Glory or Next Gen Banking through Old Glory Bank. That will be rolling out shortly. And I encourage people to take a look at that at oldglorybank.com. One thing I do want to add that in addition to the technology and the online banking experience, mobile banking experience that I covered, because we don't have a branch network, that's not our business model. It's a digital business model. Allows us to invest in that technology much more so than your typical community bank. But then also we invest in personal customer support. And so our call center, we have a very robust call center that's based in Oklahoma, really easy to communicate with and engage with to solve issues that come up ordinary course of business. Things might come up you have a question about. And so really good customer service, really good technology, and a set of values that are meaningful to your audience.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing I neglected to ask earlier, talking about sort of payment rails here and how stablecoins can be beneficial in that way from a privacy standpoint and from a censorship standpoint. One thing that I know that a lot of gun companies struggle with is, all right, you have a decent banking relationship, but what about the point of sale, the transaction, the merchant services?
Yes.
Does Old Glory Bank help facilitate that in any way?
We do.
Okay.
And in one current way and then one coming up that we'll be rolling out. Presently, we offer Old Glory Pay, which is essentially a cancel-proof version of PayPal. So customers of Old Glory Bank have the ability and to the extent a merchant is also a customer of Old Glory Bank, so kind of customer to customer, we have just our own direct closed loop system that gives comfort to the consumer who knows that because it's Old Glory Bank, that transaction is not going to be submitted to the feds. Now, I point out, if we're presented with a lawful subpoena, we are respectful of the Constitution. We're a law and order bank. We certainly would honor if we feel it's a legitimate lawful subpoena. But again, that's not what the big banks were engaging in. So we provide that comfort to our customers and the merchants to give that ability to have transactions that are, first of all, very price beneficial to the merchant, but then to the customer, a very safe closed loop system. But more broadly, as we roll out that next gen banking that I described, that'll be in the coming months, will give the ability for PayPal to be utilized with Old Glory Pay, our version of PayPal, to be utilized even using the stable coin and really fly over the top of any of the traditional rails of ACH and what the NACHA sees or the Federal Reserve sees.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, Eric Ohlhausen, I really appreciate you being here today. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you think our listeners need to know?
Sure. Real briefly, I'll say for NRA, we have a direct partnership with the NRA. Not only are we exhibiting here at the NRA for several years in a row now, we also have in place a partnership for members of the NRA who are businesses. Their group is called Business Alliance, or the clubs and associations, and it's quite a few clubs and associations and businesses who are members of the NRA. And if they are, one of the benefits because of this partnership is a 20% reduction in our general fee structure. And so while we have free accounts, naturally, if you're a business and you're having more transactions and a lot of checks being processed and so forth, there's some basic fees and so we do reduce those fees for members of the NRA and for the businesses and clubs and associations.
Yeah,
so,
fantastic.
And then one other thing is we are about to go public. We anticipate in the next couple months to be a NASDAQ traded stock, OGB, for Old Glory Bank. And currently, we announced this in January, have what's called a de-SPAC transaction that's in process now that should within a couple months enable us to be a publicly traded stock that any viewer can become an owner just directly through whatever mechanisms they use to be stock owners.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for being here, Eric. Appreciate you and the work that you're doing with Old Glory Bank.
Great.
And obviously would encourage our listeners to go and check out Old Glory Bank. I'll link to the bank's website in the show notes, as well as the video that you mentioned about the stable coins.
Great.
And anything else you'd like me to link to, I'll link to in the show notes as well.
And just oldglorybank.com, people can learn all about everything. But thank you, Alex. I appreciate your interest in what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm glad we can meet and chat here at the NRA Annual Meeting. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a bunch. All right. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you care about free banking and free money without censorship, without privacy violations, at a bank that shares your values, definitely encourage you to go check out Old Glory Bank. Until next time, remember, you are the forge of freedom.